You are currently a biological component in a massive, high-entropy machine designed to harvest your individuality for the benefit of the collective. You believe that your thoughts are sovereign, that your decisions are rational, and that your path is unique. You are hallucinating. In the cold, unyielding reality of the persistence hunt, you are operating on the swarm frequency, a prehistoric neurological program that prioritizes the safety of the collective over the survival of the individual. This is the herd mentality. It is the primary mechanism of biological management used by the giants of the matrix to ensure that the masses move in predictable, easily exploitable patterns. We are now bisecting the biology of the swarm, showing you why your internal need for social validation is a terminal vulnerability and how the apex predator uses the momentum of the herd as a liquidity event for his own sovereign expansion. You are currently a socialized slave, trapped in a feedback loop of mimicry, and the very herd you look to for protection is the one that will eventually trample you into the dust of history. Let us analyze the pathology of the mirror neuron. Evolution has equipped you with a highly sophisticated system for social synchronization. Mirror neurons are the neural sinew that allows you to perceive, interpret, and replicate the behavior of those around you. In the ancient world, this was a critical survival adaptation. If the rest of the pack suddenly sprinted away from a watering hole, those who paused to think for themselves were the first to be consumed by the predator in the grass. Thinking was a metabolic luxury that the environment did not permit. The group signal was a proxy for reality. Consequently, your nervous system is wired to perceive nonconformity as a physical threat. When you move against the crowd, your amygdala triggers a panic response similar to that of a physical assault. You feel wrong, you feel exposed, and you feel cold. This is not a moral judgment. It is a biological correction intended to force you back into the warmth of the swarm. Most of you are currently prisoners of this ancient software, unable to act on the truth because the hormonal tax of isolation is more than your fragile ego can pay. The masses are currently biological mimics. They do not seek truth, they seek consensus. They look to the left and to the right to determine the appropriate frequency for their life. This is the foundation of the normal life we have discussed in previous modules. It is a life of averaging down. If the herd is buying, they buy. If the herd is panicking, they sell. If the herd is celebrating a new hero or a new trend, they join the celebration. They are short-time preference organisms, incapable of the long-term observation required to see the grand cycle. They are moving in a massive, chaotic wave, and because they are in the middle of the wave, they cannot see the shoreline or the rocks. They believe they are safe because everyone around them is doing the same thing. They fail to realize that the center of the herd is the target for every advanced predator in the universe. The giants do not hunt the individual, they harvest the swarm. By being a part of the herd, you have effectively turned your life force into liquidity for the masters. Consider the entropy of the collective mind. In the wild, a swarm or a school of fish operates with a high level of kinetic intelligence, but zero strategic sovereignty. The swarm can move around an obstacle with blinding speed, but it cannot choose a new destination. It is a reactive organism. This is the state of the modern public. They are highly reactive to media stimuli, algorithmic trends, and manufactured outrages. Every time you react to the current thing, you are strengthening your connection to the swarm and weakening your connection to your own predatory core. You are losing the ability to see the physics of the machine because you are too busy participating in the drama of the machine. The sovereign man understands that social validation is a metabolic debt. Every like, every agreement, and every confirmation you seek from the herd is a unit of energy you are trading for the privilege of being a slave. You are building a reputation in a graveyard, and your need to be included is the primary engine of your destruction. The biology of conformity is maintained through the reward system of the brain. When you align your behavior with the herd, your brain releases a microdose of oxytocin, the cuddle hormone, providing a sense of security and belonging. This is the drug of the serf. It makes the chains feel soft and the cage feel warm. Conversely, when you deviate, the brain shuts down the reward system and initiates the social pain signal. This is why trading against the crowd is the most difficult human endeavor. It requires you to operate in a state of chronic social deprivation. You must be the one who stands alone in the dark while the rest of the world is dancing in the firelight. You must have the thermal hardening to endure the silence and the cold eye to see the herd for what it is, a metabolic harvest in progress. Most of you are too weak for this. You would rather be wrong with the crowd than right alone. You would rather die as a member than live as a sovereign. The first movement of the contrarian strategy is the clinical extraction of the social self. You must look at every opinion you hold, every goal you chase, and every fear you harbor, and ask, Is this my signal, or is this the echo of the swarm? If your goal is to have the same house, the same car, and the same career as the successful people in your circle, you are an echo. You are a biological component, performing a blind repetition of the scenario. You must begin to starve the swarm. This means the total cessation of seeking social feedback. You move your operations into the dark zone of absolute privacy. You stop talking about your plans, you stop looking for approval, and you begin to cultivate the aversion to consensus. If everyone agrees with you, you are in the danger zone. If the masses are celebrating a move, you should be looking for the exit. This is the OODA loop of the apex trader. He uses the agreement of the crowd as a counter-indicator of truth. Furthermore, we must address the sovereignty of the isolated hunter. In every ecosystem, the most lethal organisms are those that operate on the fringes. They are the ones who do not belong to the pack, the ones who have been exiled or have chosen exile. They have higher cognitive load because they cannot rely on the collective for information, but they have infinite strategic flexibility. By being outside the herd, they can see the patterns of the movement. They know where the herd is going before the herd even knows it. They position themselves at the choke points, the moments of maximum panic or maximum euphoria, and they harvest the surplus energy as the swarm passes through. This is the standard of the ghost. You are in the world, but you are not of the frequency. You are the black swan that the swarm cannot account for because your internal laws are not written in the social code. You are the biological anomaly that harvests the system. As we conclude this first pre-section of the herd mentality, you must recognize that your sense of belonging is a shackle. The environment of 2026 is becoming increasingly polarized and increasingly swarm-driven. The giants are using AI to fine-tune the frequency of the swarm, making it harder than ever to break away. You can continue to be a unit of liquidity for the matrix, following the herd into the great reset and the digital serfdom we have described. Or you can become the owner of your own frequency. You can be the one who is harvested, or you can be the harvester of the collective. The choice is yours, but the time for choosing is disappearing. The wave is rising, the rocks are ahead. You must sever the cord, embrace the silence, and claim your place on the high ground. Recognition of this reality is the only way out of the mud. Stand up, stop looking for agreement, and start trading against the crowd. We must perform a clinical dissection of the mechanics of the global exit. In the raw, predatory arena of the markets, whether they are financial, social, or attention-based, there is an immutable law that governs the transfer of energy. For a giant to move a massive amount of life force out of a position, there must be a swarm of unevolved units ready to absorb it. This is the sovereignty of liquidity. You have been taught that a rising market or a trending topic is a sign of health and opportunity. This is a lethal misunderstanding. To the apex predator, a rising trend is merely the baiting of the trap. It is the process of generating enough emotional heat in the herd to create the liquidity required for the masters to exit their positions at the peak. You are currently a liquidity unit, a biological battery whose primary function is to buy what the giants are selling and to sell what the giants are buying. You are the exit strategy for the matrix, and your FOMO, fear of missing out, is the primary harvest tool used to drain your future sovereignty. Let us analyze the pathology of the bag holder. In every market cycle, there is a moment of maximum euphoria, a point where the signal of success is so loud that even the most timid members of the swarm feel safe enough to enter the hunt. This is the thermal limit of the trend. When the media is celebrating, when your neighbors are bragging, and when the social proof is absolute, the giants are already at the gates, liquidating their holdings into the hands of the frantic masses. The herd buys at the top because their mirror neurons are screaming that everyone else is winning. They are buying recency bias, not value. They are taking the litter of the previous cycle and calling it a revolution. Within months, the heat dissipates. The giants vanish into the dark pools of their private reserves, and the herd is left holding the bag, a collection of devalued assets and shattered illusions. This is the entropy of the amateur. You are not investing, you are being recycled. The environment of 2026 is a high-frequency predatory zone. The giants utilize AI-driven sentiment analysis to determine exactly when the herd's greed frequency has reached its peak. They then trigger a liquidity event, a sudden, massive infusion of supply that overwhelms the swarm's capacity to buy. This is the predatory strike. For those ready to master the internal architecture of the hunt and stop serving as fuel for the giants, the Protocol 260 provides a strictly described route to building automated YouTube AI empires that act as your primary generator generators of digital energy. It is a structured roadmap for those ready to move from being a unit of liquidity to becoming the owner of the pipeline. Once the strike is complete, the market enters a volatility spiral, and the herd, paralyzed by the freeze response, watches as their life force evaporates. They stay in the position because they have no strategic slack. They cannot afford to be wrong, so they wait for a recovery that never comes. They are locked in a decaying territory. You must recognize that news is a lagging indicator of reality. By the time a trend reaches the public consciousness, the asymmetric advantage has already been extracted. The giants operate in the information silence, the zone of private intel and strategic positioning. They buy when the herd is in a state of terminal panic, and they sell when the herd is in a state of terminal greed. They use the media as a remote control for the swarm's nervous system. If you are making decisions based on what you see on a screen, you are a reactive prey. You are responding to a signal that was designed to manipulate you. The sovereign man understands that truth is found in the shadows. He looks for the contrarian signal, the moment where the crowd's consensus is so overwhelming that it has become a physical burden on the reality of the market. He waits for the exhaustion of the swarm, and then he moves in the opposite direction with the cold precision of a kinetic strike. The neurochemistry of the counter-trade is a form of biological defiance. To sell when everyone is buying requires you to override the reward system that demands social alignment. You must be able to sit in the isolation zone while the world is celebrating. This is why the masses can never be contrarian predators. Their need for social warmth is greater than their need for economic sovereignty. They would rather go broke with their friends than get rich alone. The giants understand this social dependency, and they weaponize it. They create echo chambers where the herd reinforces its own delusions, making it impossible for the individual to see the cliff edge ahead. You are currently in an echo chamber, and the social validation you receive for your safe choices is the primary reason you are failing. You are trading your potential for a pat on the back from a group of people who are also heading toward the slaughterhouse. Consider the biology of the squeeze. In the wild, when a predator corners a group of prey, the prey's panic causes them to huddle together, making them an even easier target. In the markets, this is the short squeeze or the panic sell. The giants use the herd's own fear to drive the price into a liquidity pocket where they can buy the entire territory for pennies. They squeeze the life force out of the swarm by triggering their survival instincts at exactly the wrong time. This is the master's maneuver. To survive, you must move from emotional reactivity to structural awareness. You must stop looking at the price and start looking at the positioning. Who owns the territory? Who is trapped? Where is the exit liquidity? If you cannot answer these questions, you are the exit liquidity. You are the lunch that is currently being discussed by the apex predators in the boardroom. The entropy of the collective ego is the final trap. When the herd is winning or believes it is winning, it enters a state of collective grandiosity. They begin to believe that the old rules no longer apply. They talk about new paradigms and permanent plateaus of prosperity. This is the signal of the end. In the history of the persistence hunt, every period of easy energy has been followed by a hard reset. The unevolved believe the feast will last forever, so they stop maintaining their predatory edge. They become soft, heavy, and visible. The sovereign man, however, maintains his winter readiness. He harvests the euphoria of the crowd and moves his energy into hardened reserves, the gold and Bitcoin we discussed in previous pre-sections. He remains lean and lethal while the swarm becomes fat and slow. He knows that the grand reset is not a crisis. It is a reallocation of force from the delusional to the disciplined. As the environment of 2026 enters a state of non-linear volatility, the liquidity harvest will become more frequent and more violent. The old cycles of decades have been compressed into cycles of months. To survive, you must achieve total psychological decoupling from the swarm. You must view the opinions of the public as nothing more than environmental data to be processed and weaponized. You must have the coldness to be the only one who isn't buying the hype and the only one who isn't selling the fear. Recognition of this biological requirement is the only way out of the serfdom of mimicry. You must stop being a unit of energy for the matrix and start being the architect of your own extraction. Stand up, audit your influences, and start harvesting the swarm before they recycle you. We must perform a deep clinical dissection of the neurobiology of the lone hunter. You believe that trading against the crowd is a matter of intellectual calculation, a simple process of identifying a discrepancy in value and acting upon it. This is a lethal misunderstanding. In the raw, chaotic arena of the persistence hunt, acting against the herd is not a cognitive challenge. It is a metabolic trauma. Your brain is an ancient piece of hardware designed for cooperative survival. When you intentionally deviate from the collective movement of the swarm, your nervous system interprets this as a severing of the lifeline. Your anterior cingulate cortex, the region associated with the processing of social pain, detects the discrepancy and triggers a distress signal identical to that of physical injury. You are not thinking about the trade, you are experiencing a hormonal assault designed by evolution to force you back into the warmth of the consensus. We are now presecting the biology of the contrarian, showing you why most humans are neurologically incapable of independent action, and how the apex predator uses thermal hardening to survive the coldness of isolation. Let us analyze the pathology of the social pain signal in the unyielding landscape of our ancestors. To be wrong with the pack meant shared hardship, but to be right alone often meant exile and death. Therefore, the brain has evolved a consensus bias that acts as a psychological leash. When the crowd is buying into a bubble, your reward circuitry, the ventral striatum, is flooded with dopamine, reinforcing the correctness of the collective hallucination. You feel a sense of flow and unity. However, when you attempt to short the euphoria or buy the blood, your amygdala initiates a high-intensity fear response. Your heart rate increases, your vision narrows, and your OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, collapses into a freeze response. You are paralyzed by the social friction of your own decision. This is why the unevolved cannot trade against the crowd. They are not limited by their IQ. They are limited by their metabolic courage. They lack the internal thermal mass to withstand the absolute zero of social disapproval. The environment of 2026 has intensified this swarm pressure through the mechanism of the digital panopticon. You are constantly connected to the frequency of the herd through your screens, your notifications, and your social feedback loops. This constant neural synchronization makes it almost impossible to achieve the strategic detachment required for sovereignty. You are living in a state of cognitive entanglement with the masses. To break this, you must execute a clinical neural extraction. You must intentionally introduce strategic isolation into your metabolic routine. The sovereign predator does not scroll, he scans. He does not participate, he probes. He treats the consensus opinion as a pathogen to be studied from behind a biohazard shield. He understands that information asymmetry is only possible if you are operating on a different frequency than the broadcast. If you are breathing the same information air as the herd, you will inevitably succumb to the same respiratory failure when the trend suffocates. Consider the entropy of the reactive OODA loop. The swarm operates on a low-latency, high-volume reactive loop. They see a signal, they feel the emotion, and they act immediately. This is the reflexive swarm. It is highly efficient for avoiding a single predator, but it is utterly predictable for an apex strategist. The lone hunter, however, operates on a high-latency, deep orientation loop. He observes the swarm's movement. He orients to the structural weakness of their positioning. He decides based on first principles of biology and physics, and he acts with kinetic finality only when the herd has reached the point of no return. This is predatory patience. It is the ability to wait in the dead zone of the trend, while the unevolved are burning their life force in the frenzy of the feast. The sovereign man is the one who can remain thermally invisible, while the market is in a state of hyperthermia. He is the cold outlier in a hot distribution. The biology of strategic slack is your only defense against the neurochemistry of panic. Most traders and most individuals operate with zero slack. Their capital is fully committed, their ego is tied to their win rate, and their social status is dependent on their current performance. They have no reserve energy to absorb the social pain of being wrong alone. When the market moves against them, they experience a systemic shutdown. The sovereign predator, however, maintains a hormetic buffer. He keeps 50% of his life force in the cold reserve, gold and Bitcoin, that we discussed previously. This hardened root provides the neurochemical evidence of safety required to keep his prefrontal cortex online during the grand reset. He can afford to be socially wrong for 100 days because his survival is not tied to the approval of the swarm. He has decoupled his survival frequency from his hunting frequency. This is the ultimate predatory split. Furthermore, we must address the entropy of the expert consensus. The giants utilize institutional experts to calibrate the frequency of the herd. These experts are the alpha units of the swarm, designed to provide a logical narrative for the herd's irrational movements. They talk about fundamentals, policy shifts, and structural stability. This is the intellectual camouflage of the harvest. The sovereign man understands that experts are merely high-status components of the machine. He does not listen to their words. He scans their thermal signature. Are they sweating? Are they stuttering? Are they overcompensating for a hidden volatility? He uses the unanimity of the experts as a signal of terminal fragility. When all the alphas agree, the reset defeat is imminent. He prepares his exit while the experts are still explaining why the feast will never end. He has the coldness to be the only one who sees the rot in the foundation of the fortress. The biology of the hormetic strike is the final stage of the contrarian OODA loop. When the herd reaches the state of maximum exhaustion, when the FOMO has turned into systemic fatigue, the sovereign predator strikes. He does not trade the trend. He liquidates the herd. He takes the opposite side of the swarm's final desperate push. This act requires an absolute biological override of the self-preservation instinct. Your body will scream that you are committing suicide by stepping in front of the wave. You must have the thermal hardening to ignore the screaming. You must trust the math of the cycle over the emotion of the moment. This is the standard of the apex. You are the biological filter that removes the excess energy from the system. You are the recycler of the delusional. By taking their life force at the moment of their collapse, you are performing a natural service to the hierarchy of sovereignty. As we conclude this pre-section, you must recognize that trading against the crowd is not a strategy. It is a state of being. It is the result of a total neurological rewiring. You must become an organism that thrives in the vacuum of isolation. You must learn to love the social pain of nonconformity, treating it as the hormetic stress that hardens your sovereign ego. The environment of 2026 is designed to keep you warm, connected, and compliant. To survive, you must choose to be cold, isolated, and dominant. You must move from the swarm frequency to the predatory frequency. Stand up, audit your social dependencies, and begin the final hardening of your lone hunter's heart. The final integration of the contrarian hunt is the transition from market survival to the absolute sovereignty of the exit. You must realize that the environment of 2026 is a massive self-correcting organism that utilizes the herd as a biological waste product. The swarm exists to be consumed. Its collective energy is the fuel that powers the expansion of the apex predators. To trade against the crowd is not a hobby. It is the ultimate act of biological reclamation. You are taking the misplaced life force of the delusional and weaving it into the hardened sinew of your own dynasty. We are now precepting the mechanics of the final harvest, showing you how to turn the systemic collapse of the swarm into your asymmetric windfall, and why your willingness to endure the social zero is the only thing that separates you from the cattle. You have survived the isolation of the dead zone. Now you must execute the kill with clinical indifference. Let us analyze the pathology of the trend exhaustion. Every movement of the herd has a terminal point, a moment where the metabolic cost of maintaining the consensus exceeds the available energy of the participants. This is the entropy of euphoria, when everyone who could possibly buy has already bought, when every expert has reached the peak of their optimism, and when the social validation of the move is absolute. The trend enters a state of terminal hypothermia. It is visible, it is heavy, and it is ready to shatter. The sovereign predator identifies this thermal peak not by looking at the price, but by scanning the noise floor of the swarm. When the noise is deafening, the reality is empty. He positions himself at the 0 point, the exact coordinate where the momentum of the swarm will reverse into a cascading failure. He is the only one who is shorting the sun, while the world is celebrating the light. The biology of the panic pivot is the hallmark of the apex hunter. When the trend finally breaks, when the first biological leak appears in the collective hallucination, the herd does not move with logic. It moves with total systemic panic. The oxytocin that kept them warm is replaced by an instant lethal infusion of adrenaline. The swarm collapses inward. This is the liquidity black hole. During this phase, the unevolved are paralyzed by the cognitive dissonance of their own failure. They stay in the burning building because they are waiting for permission to leave. The sovereign predator, however, has already executed his pivot. He is the first out of the gate. He harvests the exit liquidity provided by the desperate masses, converting their panic sales into his hardened reserves. He is the benefactor of their entropy. He understands that samomune vitaschit, that you cannot save the herd from itself. You can only survive them by being the one who exits while they are still arguing about the fairness of the collapse. We must address the sovereignty of the invisible gain. In the aftermath of the harvest, the sovereign man does not return to the herd to brag about his success. To do so would be to re-establish the social tether he worked so hard to sever. He remains in the dark zone. He moves his surplus energy into the sovereign vaults of gold and Bitcoin, and he disappears from the social radar. He understands that the envy of the swarm is a secondary predatory threat. While the masses are looking for someone to blame for their destruction, the sovereign is already planning the next hunt from the silence of his fortress. This is the standard of the silent king. You do not hunt for status, you hunt for strategic capacity. Status is a signal for the unevolved. Capacity is the reality of the apex. If you still feel the need to show the herd how right you were, you are still a prisoner of their frequency. You are just a successful slave. The environment of the future is a winner-take-all distribution. As the Grand Reset of 2026 continues to grind the linear middle class into the dust, the gap between the swarm and the sovereign will become a biological chasm. There will be no middle ground. You will either be the one who is sculpted by the volatility or the one who harvests the tails of the distribution. This is the great sifting. To survive, you must cultivate a predatory disdain for the safe choices of the masses. You must view their agreement as a warning label and their panic as a buy signal. You must become a biological anomaly, an organism that thrives on the very uncertainty that destroys the collective. Recognition of this requirement is the only way to move from the cattle pen to the high ground. You are not a trader, you are the natural selection of the financial world. Consider the entropy of the new normal. Every time the swarm is recycled, they eventually adapt to their new, lower status. They accept the digital ID, they accept the CBDC, and they accept the rationed life. They call it stability. This is the acclimatization of the prey. The sovereign man, however, never adapts to the lower frequency. He uses each systemic shock to increase his relative dominance. He is the one who annexes the territory that the masses have abandoned in their fear. He is the one who captures the assets that the unevolved have been forced to liquidate. He is building a dynastic moat of hard energy that the giants cannot cross. He is the architect of the new aristocracy, not based on title, but based on biological resilience and strategic autonomy. He is the persistence hunter who never stopped moving while the world was in freeze. The neurochemistry of the final stand requires you to embrace the sublime loneliness of the apex. There is no community at the top of the food chain. There are only allies of convenience and competitors of respect. You must be the one who finds thermal comfort in the absolute zero of your own sovereign will. You must be the one who can look at a world in chaos and see only opportunity and extraction. This is the hormonal transformation of the sovereign. You have removed the empathy leaks that the matrix used to control you. You have replaced the need for belonging with the will to power. You are now a high-voltage organism, capable of directing the lightning of the systemic reset into the batteries of your own dynasty. You are the black swan that has finally landed. As we conclude this pre-section of herd mentality, you must recognize that the crowd is not your family, your nation, or your safety net. The crowd is a metabolic field to be harvested. You have the information, you have the radar, and you have the protocols. The only thing left is the will to execute against the screaming instincts of your own social brain. You can continue to be a unit of liquidity for the giants, following the herd into the slaughterhouse of the reset, or you can become the owner of the exit. You can be the one who drowns in the wave or the one who rides the surge. The choice is yours. The herd is moving. The cliff is ahead. The silence is calling. Sever the cord, embrace the isolation, and claim your place in the architecture of the immortal. Stand up, stop looking for agreement, and start trading against the world.